What do you think these three animation examples have in common? Let me help. They were all created without writing any code inside the framer, and they all have this amazing fluid feel. But how are they so smooth and fluid, almost like liquid? Well, the single secret behind all of this is one element that was added to these animations. Think of it as the secret ingredient that takes your animations from average to outstanding. In this video, I'm going to reveal that secret ingredient and show you step by step how you can use it to create the most fluid animations ever. My name is Nandi, this is Framer University, and let's get started. So as you can see here on my screen, basically this is the sort of like morphing, liquid, gooey effect that we are looking for with this example. So that we have different shapes within the animation and they are interacting with each other like this. The question is, how can we do this? How can we do this without writing any code really easily? So basically, we can just go to framer.university and here we can search for the Gooey effect for Framer. And basically, this is just a really simple component that we can add inside of Framer to create this effect. So let me show you how it works. You can just copy the component here. Then you can go to Framer, and then here as you can see we have these two blobs. This is what it would look like without the Gooey component. We don't really have that nice fluid feel, and we can just paste this component here that we copied to our clipboard. Let me just press Command and V, and it is now right within the circle. As you can see, it was pasted in within the circle. On the left layers panel, we can just grab it and just paste it within the main. And so now as you can see, these two circles here are nicely like having this effect and they look much better. So basically the way this Gooey effect works is that you place it within a frame. In this case, we are placing it within this main frame right here. And all of the other frames within this main frame will now have this Gooey effect. If we add a frame that is not within the main, so let's just create a frame here, we'll just paste it within the desktop, and I'll move it with episode positioning to the center and maybe a little bit to the top. You can see that it... So sorry, I had to adjust this little illustration a little bit so we're not drawing anything inappropriate. So as you can see, since this frame here is not within the main stack, it is not really having this Gooey effect. It will have the Gooey effect if I place it within the main. As you can see now, it is nicely gooeyed together. So basically, this is how it works. Really simple, really easy. We can also customize the intensity here on the right properties panel. So it can either be more intense or less intense. And basically that's it. Now you can see that if I drag this, it will nicely have the Gooey effect. It is really important to note that this effect doesn't work on Safari, because it's just not compatible with it, and it will also not work in Firefox and also will not work on iOS mobile devices. And that is connected to why it doesn't work with Safari, but yeah, just keep this in mind. But yeah, you will basically see this in Safari if you use this effect, so it will not have the Gooey effect, but I don't think that that's like a big deal. But yeah, now I think we can go ahead and just create a quick little example, a little interaction with this effect, because it is really easy to create something like this inside of Framer. I'm going to go inside of the tutorial page. But by the way, what I want to mention here is that I have a bunch of different pages here on this file with different examples that are using this effect, and you can just remix this project. In the description you're going to find a link. You can click that and you can just copy this project onto your account, and yeah, you can just take a look at all of these examples, and you can also come to the starter page and just start creating this example with me. So what we're gonna do is this little tooltip. So when we hover over this, we see that little tooltip, but it's not just a simple tooltip, it has this nice fluid gooey effect. So yeah, it's gonna be pretty simple. I'm gonna go to the tutorial. You should go to the starter page and just start creating this with me. It will be a great little practice. So I'm gonna just change the background color to white. I'm gonna start by pressing T on my keyboard. this switches to the text tool, and I can just click here within this main and I can write get started. So this will be the text within our button. I'll also make sure that it doesn't have this mono font, but it is actually Inter. So I'm going to switch it to Inter. It's going to be probably medium, and the text size will be 16, and the color will be white. You might be asking, Nandi, why is it white? Well, it's because we're going to wrap it inside of a black frame, and so it will be actually visible. But how do we actually wrap this inside of a stack or a frame? Well, basically we can just right click and click add stack, or we can press the option command and enter shortcut. So as you can see now, this get started is wrapped in a stack. We can call this button, and we can set the width to fit content so it fits the text within. Now I'll just set the fill color of this stack to black, and I'll adjust the padding and also the height. So the height will be 44 pixels, not 444, but only 44. And then the padding will be increased on the right and on the left. You can see that I'll just add 20 and 20 on both sides. So now we have this little button here, and we can just, maybe round its corners with radius set to 100. And now we have a pretty great base. So what I'm going to also do is I'm going to optimize this little button by making sure we cannot select the text on it. So I'm going to select the text here, styles, and then user select will be added and set to none, and it will basically result in the text not being selectable anymore, which is a great experience when we have these interactive elements. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button and then press Command and D on my keyboard. This duplicates it, and this is really great for us because, the tooltip will basically have a really similar structure. Then I'm going to select the main stack, and I'll change it to vertical direction, so these are placed right below each other. Then I'm going to just write it's free right here, it's free, and I'm going to change it to 12 text size. Then I'm going to also change it to DM mono, and I'll make sure that the height is decreased to 28 pixels, and then the right padding will also be decreased to 12, and the left one will be also 12. So now basically we have the tooltip design. We can also rename it to tooltip here on the left layers panel. So now let's think about how can we add this Gooey effect to these elements. What we're going to do is we're going to wrap both of them in a container. So we're kind of like grouping them together. I'm just selecting both the button and the tooltip and pressing Option Command and Enter. If you remember, that was the shortcut for adding a stack. As you can see now, the tooltip and the button is wrapped within a stack. I can rename that to tooltip button component, because this will actually be a component a little bit later. Then I'm going to set this to a width fit, so it fits the content within. And then I can just grab the Gooey effect component and place it within this tooltip button component frame, so then the tooltip and the button will interact with each other with this Gooey effect. So I'm going to go to Assets panel and just drag and drop the Gooey effect from here to within this frame. It's really important that when you already have this Gooey component in your project, you can just access it from the Assets panel. So now you can see that this gooiness is too much for us. It's a little bit too intense. So we can switch it back to something a little bit less, maybe 4 or 5. Okay, so now we can start thinking about how are we going to animate this whole thing? Well, we're basically going to change the tooltip to absolute positioning so we can start moving it around freely. Now both of these are relatively positioned, so we can only reorder these, which is not really great for us. I want to be able to move the tooltip freely, so I'm going to set it to absolute positioning. And I'll also make sure that the Gooey effect, I actually forgot that the Gooey effect should also be positioned absolutely so it doesn't take up any space of the component. By the way, you can see that it's a completely invisible component. If you set it to absolute positioning, it also doesn't take up any space. It just adds the effect. Great. So now this tooltip actually should be behind the button, and it should also be visible when I'm moving it to the top. It's not visible now because the tooltip button component wrapping container that we created is set to overflow hidden, which basically means that the overflowing parts will be hidden. If we switch it to visible, now you can see it's nicely visible, and if I'm starting to move this to the top and to the bottom, we can already see that we're gonna have a really nice gooey effect here for this animation. So now all I have to do is to make sure that somehow this tooltip is actually behind the button, because now it's on top of it. So basically it is on top of the button right now because it has a z-index set to 1, and the button only has a z-index set to 0 because it actually doesn't even specify it right here, and z-index 0 is like the default. So I can add z-index here, you can see it's z-index 0. So now I'll just have to make sure that the button has a higher z-index, so maybe 2. And as you can see, the element with the higher z-index will be, on top of other elements that have lower z-index. So in this case, now the tooltip is nicely behind the button, so it can be, animated in from that position. But what we also have to think about is what is going to be the starting state for this animation. Because if we take a look at the final button, you can see that first, this tooltip comes in as a little circle. So we have to define that, form for it as the starting state, and then we can, expand it out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just make this smaller by setting the width to fixed, and then setting it to 28, because then it will match the height. So it's gonna be like a nice circle. And then we can also hide the text by switching opacity to 0, because you can see that first, the circle doesn't have any content within. We only show the little text within when it expands out. So we can set the opacity to 0. By the way, I'm going to also add a little detail here. I'm going to blur it a little bit. So I'm going to set blur to, 2. Then I'm going to set the opacity to 0. And maybe I can also set transform scale 0.8. So it's going to also scale in a little bit when we appear. So now this tooltip can actually be moved to the bottom here inside of the actual button, or behind the button. And then now we can turn this into a component and we can start defining different variants. Then we can connect those with interactions. So I'm going to just right click here, create component. And then now we can see that here we are within the component canvas. I'm going to switch my framer to light mode so we can actually see what we are doing here. And so this is going to be the start state of the animation. So this is the start primary variant. So now here we're just gonna define the different states of the animation with different variants, and then we're just gonna be connecting between them with different interactions, and that's how we're gonna animate this little button. So if you think about it, the next variant will be the state of the button where this circle comes out and it is just standing right here. I'm trying to show it, but it seems like I cannot. So it's just standing right here. And then the last state will be when it expands out. So we're gonna go in 2 steps to our final end state. So this will actually be just the mid state. So I'm gonna just write mid, and I'm gonna also write a right arrow, just showing that from this mid state, we are going to the right to the end state, because the end will actually be right here. So what we're doing here is we're just animating the tooltip here to the top a little bit. I think we're gonna have 14 pixels distance between these two. I'm pressing down Option on my keyboard to measure the distance. And so then we can create another variant. I'm gonna click here. This will be the end variant. And here we're just expanding it. So we're switching the width to fit content. And then the text will be opacity 1, blur 0, and scale 1. And basically that's it. So now, if we can somehow connect these with interactions, we will see a nice animation, something like this. It's actually really cool that we're doing this example, because you're going to also learn a pretty interesting technique for animating these little buttons, which is called the rollover technique. What we're going to do is we're going to connect the start and the mid variants with a mouse enter trigger. So I'm going to just drag from this little icon, connect to mid, and the trigger will be mouse enter here. So what this means is when I hover over, I go to this state. As you can see, it is a little bit too fast. I want to be able to see this gooey effect a little bit more, so I'll just make sure that it's a little bit slower. I'm going to set it to 0.7 here on the right panel by clicking transition, and then setting the time to 0.7. Now you can see that it is much better. We see the little circle getting out of the button. So now all we have to do is we have to roll over from the mid to the end. And that needs to be an automatic like interaction or a transition that happens automatically when we go to the mid. So I can connect from mid to end, and the trigger for that will be appear. So when this appears on the screen, it automatically triggers the transition to the end. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take a look at one more thing, because you can see that we added this mouse enter interaction to the primary, but it was added to all other variants as well, because everything that we do in the primary gets added to all other variants. So we just have to remove these mouse enter interactions from the rest of the variants. So now let's see what this does. As you can see, now we have mouse enter, it takes us to mid, and we have the appear, which should take us to the end. Let's see what we have. And as you can see, we have a little issue, because it feels like that we are transitioning from the start to the end. We don't really see this mid state, this little circle. It starts expanding right away, and you can see that on the original or on the final that we are actually creating, we first see a little circle and only then we expand out. So what are we doing wrong here? Why is it just starting to, expand out right away when we hover over this? Well, it's because the way this appear works, this appear trigger here that takes us from mid to end, is it basically triggers this transition immediately when it sees this variant on the screen. However, we are transitioning from start to mid with a 0.7 second transition time. So it takes us 0.7 seconds to go from the start to the mid variant. However, technically, as soon as I hover over the start, technically this component is now on the mid variant, and since it knows that it has an appear interaction set on it, it will go immediately to the end state. And that's why we kind of skip this middle state. We don't have time to animate into that because we immediately go and move on to the end. So to fix this, we have to select the appear interaction that we created, and we just have to add a little bit of delay. So we wait a little, and only then we animate to the end. So now what will happen is that we hover over start, we move to mid, and after 0.3 seconds, we move and roll over to the end. So let's take a look at that. As you can see, I hover, we nicely see the circle, and then it expands out, rolls over to the end. Now the last thing that we have to think about is how do we go back? Because if I leave with my cursor, nothing really happens. So we have to define the mouse leave interaction as well. So can we use this mid variant for going back as well? That's the question. And the answer is no. Because think about it, if we connect from the end variant to the mid with mouse leave, then we will, be on this mid variant, but it, takes us back to the end because it already has this appear effect right here. So whenever this appears on the screen, we are going to the end. What is the solution for this? Well, we just have to create another mid, which takes us back to the start. So we can just have a different arrow here showing that it is indeed going back to the start. And we're going to basically create a little loop right here. I'm going to select the end. I'm going to connect to mid back. It's going to be a mouse leave interaction. And then on the mid, we're not going to go to end on appear, but we're going to go back to the start, and we're going to have the same 0.3 seconds delay. So let's take a look at this now. We go from start to mid with mouse enter effect. We roll over from mid to the end automatically. And then when we leave with our cursor from end, we go to mid back, and it rolls us over back to the start after a little delay. So this will result in a really nice animation like this. And now we can basically add a link to these buttons on the top right. So maybe we can link to any page right here. And then we have this button on our website, which looks really nice. So yeah, that's it for this video. I really do hope that you were able to follow along with me and create this little button tooltip animation with this fluid effect. I think it's pretty cool that inside of Framer we can create these animations without writing any code, and with these fluid effects by just adding a little component in. It's super cool. And yeah, make sure to check out Framer University. I have a bunch of other components just like this, so you have to dig into the resources page. I have over 200 resources, so you can spend some time on that website. And then yeah, also let me know in the comments if you have any questions or requests. I want to make sure to do my best to answer you guys. And yeah, like this video, subscribe for more, and I'm going to see you in the next one.